Hello everyone, I'm Vivi and welcome back. Remember that moment Ratchet and Rivet meet face to face for the first time? I have to say, it's one of my favorite scenes from this game. Little tapping a kid does on Ratchet's arm as Rivet and Clank show up, it's just the most adorable thing ever. What really stood out in this scene is how Ratchet and Rivet feel, or how they express themselves towards one another. There is for sure quite a moment of awkwardness, and I believe it stems from the fact that Rivet has never seen another Lombax. At least that's the notion the game has been perpetuating. As for Ratchet, well, he's seen another Lombax with a not-so-happy ending. Something important I'll bring up again later. The point is, in Ratchet's case, he hasn't seen another Lombax in years. Looking at the prologue in Rift Apart, they haven't done anything heroic in years, so naturally speaking, years must have passed since the last time he saw Lombax. This sequence right here as Ratchet turns around and stumbles on Rivet, just what is happening here? There are likely multiple ways one could interpret this scene. Some might think there's attraction in the air, others might believe it's anxiety manifesting here. I do feel it's the latter. We'll get into that slowly. As these two meet each other for the first time, we can't deny the fact there's mutual eye contact. Looking into each other's eyes like that, looking away and looking back, it could mean there's some level of attraction going on, or it could at least be an indication of wanting to communicate with this person. According to some studies, research finds that direct gaze is associated with confidence, interest, and attraction. In addition, many people consider eye contact to be a sign of trustworthiness. Another interesting thing here is Ratchet's body posture. Notice how he automatically puts his hands behind his back and stands completely straight after waving high. It's highly likely he was simply feeling confident. All in all these what-ifs and maybes just goes to show how one could interpret this scene. Heck, they banter a little afterwards and that alone could just come off as being friendly. So, looking at this scene from an overall perspective, I think what we're looking at is simply anxiety. I feel that's how this moment can be interpreted between these two. We're talking about two characters, species of their own kind at that, meeting face to face for the first time. As stated earlier, their body language can be interpreted in various ways and we cannot deny that. But we also can't deny the buildup of this very specific moment, the events or sequences we had prior to their meetup. Taking all that into account just goes to show how Ratchet and Rivet are simply anxious to meet, them struggling to put words together at first, or just that moment of awkward silence. It's almost as if they don't want to disappoint one another. Now let's take a look at their behavior prior to their introduction, starting with Rivet. While she was on her way to Sargasso with Clank on the ship, she couldn't believe Clank's story. Actually refused to believe such story. Another nefarious? Another Lombax? Miraculously being Clank's friend? Yeah, no. No way she was going to believe that. That for her was a too good to be true moment. She got all worked up by the thought of another Lombax appearing here in her dimension. That all changed when she took a look at Clank's memory banks, and there you have it. She stares at the screen, goes quiet for a second, and then finally starts acknowledging Clank's story. While at Xerxes, Rivet gets to hear Ratchet. Then, they both say the same thing. It's not the fact they say the same thing here, it's how they feel about it. Just them being taken by surprise. Before hopping off their ship at Xerxes, Rivet actually rehearses her introduction to Ratchet. It could have been out of fear of disappointment, which potentially can make a person even more anxious. As for Ratchet, upon revisiting Savali, there's an interesting in-game line of dialogue that plays. A question, rather. Clank asks Ratchet if he's the first Lombax Rivet has ever met. That got Ratchet curious, actually, and starts wondering the same. He hopes he lived up to the hype.
I wonder if you are the first Lombax Rivet has ever met.
Huh. Yeah. I hope I lived up to the hype.
I would not worry about that.
This, I think, could strongly resonate with the possible fear of disappointment which we discussed earlier. The fear of not living up to their expectations when they met face to face. Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart is pretty much a standalone game. It garners both longtime fans and brand new. Now why do I bring this up, you might ask? Well, there's two ways of looking at it when it comes to Ratchet's thoughts. One is from a casual perspective, the other a bit more in-depth, let's call it. Just looking at Rift Apart alone, certain scenes with Kit reveal his doubts and worries about the prospect of meeting the Lombaxes. He explains it's hard to miss someone you've never met, but guesses he does miss them. Ratchet reveals to Kit he did want to find his family for a long time, but the closer he got to it, the more those anxious thoughts kicked in. What if they're not what he's expecting and vice versa? Another one would be during the elevator sequence on Cordelian. Not only does he emphasize on his fear of disappointing them, but he also goes on to undervalue himself, like how they invented so many brilliant things. He still seemed undecisive here whether or not he truly wanted to find the Lombaxes. That's until we travel to Ardolis. He makes up his mind and asks Clank if he'd join him in finding the Lombaxes. What Rift Apart showcased is Ratchet's fear and worries. Rivet wonders why Ratchet wouldn't want to visit the Lombaxes. Clank replies by saying it's either due to uncertainty or fear and that it's complicated. Rivet brings that up again during this heated moment between them. They do end up apologizing after the way they acted here, but if you really think about it, Ratchet doesn't really deny her statement. If we dig deeper, we could perhaps understand Ratchet's fear and anxieties better. By this, I mean going back in time. Ratchet's had many adventures up until this point, but we can't forget what happened in A Crack in Time. Ratchet meets one of his kind, his father's best friend at that, but then this Lombax, Alistair Azimuth, almost puts the whole galaxy at risk, wanting to rewind time using the Great Clock to undo his mistakes. Not only did Ratchet encounter an action which he never would have imagined from his own race, but he also witnessed the death of said Lombax. Alistair finally realized that what he was doing was too risky, and he sacrificed himself, stopped the clock from going haywire. After the events of A Crack in Time, we got the comics. Comics revealed the emotional impact Alistair's death brought upon Ratchet. He feels remorse, and you can really feel it here, from both his posture to his actual words after Clank's statement. Maybe, but it never took one either. Ratchet losing Azimuth could have easily caused long-term trauma which possibly fueled his anxiety in Rift Apart. So with that said and done, what do you think about all this? How do you personally interpret this scene in Rift Apart? Leave your thoughts in the comments section below. Like always, thank you to my patrons for sticking around and supporting the channel. I really appreciate it. As for you viewers, thank you for always tuning in. I've been Vivi, and until next time.